Hello, welcome to the Goode vlog. I'm Goode. Today we're going to talk about several things, but first of all, I have released part 1 of my update, my intelligence update regarding recent meetings, and it's posted on SphereBeingAlliance.com in the news intelligence section. I had wanted to go ahead and put out the full report for the intel briefing, but I received an email from one of the producers from Gaia Television. They wanted me to fly out immediately to film some more Cosmic Disclosure episodes. And being that I wouldn't be able to get up there until October, that's pretty much, we had to get it done. So, interestingly enough, I just released part 1 because I had to get packed, had to get ready because I'm flying out tomorrow to go to Boulder to shoot episodes of Cosmic Disclosure until Tuesday. Wednesday, fly back to DFW, then turn around the next morning, fly out to, I believe, Sacramento to go out to Mount Shasta. So that's going to be a lot of flying, a lot of activity, but activity that I'll be able to catch on the vlog, for the vlog on video. So there's going to be a lot of stuff going in the background that we should be able to get some very interesting video from all of these events. Not to mention that David Wilcock, myself, and another guest are going to be on a panel at Ancient Aliens Alien Con in October. So we should get some interesting video behind the scenes there as well. So also, let's see, I now have another email address set up. It's goodevlog@gmail.com. So please send any messages you have about this vlog to that email address. And speaking of emails, I received over 300 emails on the Mount Shasta ticket contest. And it was way more than I expected. I received more emails than I could go through. And the ones that I did go through, there were a few that had some very interesting attachments. And you know who you are, my goodness. So it's for the Mount Shasta Secret Space Program Summer Conference. It's August 27th and 28th. And let's see, while we're there, the Full Disclosure Now group, they have their own YouTube channel. It should be a link right here for you to click on to subscribe. Have put together a dinner and a podcast for the people that are going to be there. And that's going to be very interesting. That should be fun. It's you can, if you go to Full Disclosure Now's YouTube channel, and go ahead and subscribe. It's going to be Thursday the 24th at 8 p.m. and that's Pacific time. I believe Yvonne Palmero, Justin DeCamp, Laura Eisenhower, Michael Sala, Rob Potter, myself, and possibly KP from KP's blog are going to be there and having a discussion. So please join us for that if you can't make it out to the conference. One thing I think I did forget to mention when it came to the contest is that there were 2 winners. Both of them have been informed, and their information has been passed on to Rob Potter, who organized the conference. And it was a really huge success. I received over 300 emails, a lot of really excellent, well thought out paragraphs on why they should go, and some very interesting ones as well. So anyway, hopefully we'll have some video of the winners when we post the video of the behind-the-scenes activity that goes on. So I look forward to sharing all that with you very soon. Now, this Friday, I have a conference, online conference. It's the Extraterrestrial Disclosure Summit, and it's August 19th. So take a look at my website under events. That's listed, and you should be able to join that conference. Also, please keep an eye out for a video that is going to be put together by Vashta. She does a lot of the art from Cosmic Disclosure. And we're putting together a video that's going to have all the different art, the end result, as well as my sketches that I sent the artists to work from. And you'll see the progression of how it came into the final product. And it'll promote the people, the artists' websites, and show you how to get in contact with them to do art for you if you're interested. Please let me know what you think of the new opener for the video. That was created by David Wilcock last night, and he sent it to me this morning, so I thought I would use it for this video, possibly other videos in the future. We may make some changes. But just let me know what you think in the comments below, and I know David will keep an eye out for it too. Thank you.
To the moon and to Mars, and to a local attempt to a local star system that didn't go too well. None of these really went too well for them in the beginning. They were having crashes and failures and losing people.
And how much of this did Hitler know about? And I'm asking because the societies and the research that was going on, and with the Draco, was this something that was kept away from Hitler?
It appears that he knew quite a bit, but there was a lot that some of his henchmen started to take control of, and they started running it, a lot of it beyond what he was privy to.
Because
but he definitely, he knew all about the bases in Antarctica and South America in these cavern systems that they were building.
Right.
He was very aware of that. Some of these were joint bases, and we were told where we could build bases by the Draco.
Was there a reason?
Or not we, the Germans.
Yeah, right. Was there a because if he would have had, to me, a direct knowledge of the ability to, have flying saucers over Washington, D.C. with offensive weapons, it would have played out that way. But it didn't. And was that because of the Draco? Was there a reason why, or did he not know about it?
No, he knew about the weapons. They were the weaponizing the discs was a little bit more difficult than they expected. Using kinetic weapons didn't, they could fire a good shot off, but then they had issues with it restabilizing. So they needed directed energy weapons, and that was something that they had under development as well at the time when the Axis, I guess, fell.
Oh, I get you. So like putting a cannon, right? When you say kinetic, like putting a cannon or something
right.
big on one of these ships and it fired, it would become unstable.
Right.
Ah, I got you. That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Well, when did they end up, the Nazis, building the moon base? I don't want to get to Mars just yet. When did they build that moon base, and how big was it?
They built it in stages. It was not as large as it has been depicted in certain movies. The part that was above ground were a little bit larger than, I guess you would say, like shipping containers that go on these barges.
Okay.
And they were connected together and did form somewhat a swastika.
So it was really shaped like a swastika.
Yes, but in the beginning, what they were doing is they were traveling in these larger disc craft they had, and were scouting out places to build. They were finding out how unfriendly different parts of the moon can be if you don't have permission to be there. So they were making all these types of discoveries and mistakes, and in the beginning, they found some ancient buildings that they actually ended up pressurizing and using for a short period of time while they were building their bases.
So it was basically a swastika built out of shipping containers. Am I picturing this correctly?
Similar, yeah.
Right. Okay, I got you. And then when did they make it to Mars? And are we dealing with, like, is this 1940? 1941, was this during World War II?
Yes, this was through late, I believe, like 39 through the early 40s that they were really striking out and starting to do these expeditions. And I can't remember the name of the star. They tried to make a trip to a certain star system and ended up, I believe, losing their crew.
Interesting. With the Mars base, you describe, and I think this occurred on the moon too as well. You describe them taking the local dirt, right, the local soil, putting that in bags, right, like sandbags, building up walls, and then spraying stuff over it. And that's how they got it done.
Yeah, the small little base type things they would build on the surface were done this way. Most of it was built underground. But if you had to have a security outpost with, 30, 60 operators, then they would have these huge, it's like 6-foot long sandbags filled with the local Martian dirt.
Right.
And build up the walls. And then they would come through and spray them down with this stuff that's kind of like the truck bed lining.
Right.
And then they would do this on the inside and the outside. And on the inside, they would start to build it out, with walls and, pipes, like you would have in an RV almost.
Yeah.
And electrical systems.
It seems like Elon Musk has got it all wrong, doesn't he? Right. It only makes sense if you think about it. It's a very, very interesting way to look at it. And then,
well, Elon Musk, that's something they'll live in tin cans for a little while, but after that, they'll learn how to mold things out of the ground. They'll probably start bringing strange things there, like bamboo, to try to grow and start to use that material in building. There's a lot that can be done and has already been experimented with.
Yeah, totally. And what do you think he knows about Mars? Obviously, he thinks he knows a lot. But, wherever he starts to build, is it going to be away from existing stuff that is there? I mean, to keep him compartmentalized?
I would be shocked if he was not, if he did not have to submit for pre-approval areas that he would like to set up these little colonies.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting. I'm very excited about the privatization of space. You know what I mean? Keeping the players out of it, and we'll just see how it plays out.
Yeah, it's been heavily interfered with so far.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and then following World War II, we have Operation High Jump. And what was discovered and what actually happened in High Jump?
Well, they had a lot of intel, and a lot of it was very hard to believe. Part of the intel having to do with, William Tompkins has come forward recently with his book and his information that, has me convinced that a lot of the information I was looking at on the smart glass pad came from briefings that he sat through back in the 40s.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it's uncanny.
And the discovery down there, because we have the Draco, and did the Draco show the Nazis their base in Antarctica? How did that play out? The Draco were there first, obviously.
Yes, the Draco ended up bringing the Nazis down to Antarctica at the time and showed them an area of underground caverns that they could easily, with their current technology and fabrication abilities, build out a pretty extensive base system.
Do you know how these caverns were formed?
Well, a lot of them were formed with just from volcanism and the plate tectonics. Some of these are giant rift systems from plates that have pulled apart and filled with water, or some of them have not filled with water. A lot of them are lava tube systems that, go deep under the earth. And, the earth is more of a honeycomb than people realize. We have caverns and tunnel systems, some of them that never connected naturally, but were opened up by ancient beings that we have no idea who they were.
How big are they? What did you see when you were there under the ice?
Well, when I was under the ice, I saw the above ground. It looked like if you were to fly over a area where I guess a lot of ships come in. It was like a shipping yard, this largest area, and there were these huge electromagnetically propelled submarines that had these shells opened on them, and these cranes had rolled out on this train track and were unloading them. And, they were huge. And I saw, after we went down below the surface of the water and the craft I was in, we did then get to see these submarines traveling underwater and traveling through this rift system that travels all the way from the northwest corner of Antarctica through South America, up through Central America, and through the west coast of the United States.
Whoa, excuse me. I just coughed live on the air. Hold on. Oh, wow. I need a hit of this coffee. Very strange. It just came out of nowhere, too, as I started to speak. Why did the Dracos take the Nazis down there? Didn't they see the bad side to the Nazis? And why did they have that kind of alliance?
Well, they basically had the same type of ideology and goals. They had world conquest on their agenda, and they were both groups, the Draco and the Nazis, are very occult. So they were very similar.
Was it because there were certain elements of certainly with the Vril, maybe, that there were good Germans that they were okay with? Did they understand the German, the Nazi agenda from World War II? And do you think the Dracos would have backed off if they knew?
Well, the Draco were already negative, so they didn't care if the Nazis were positive or negative. There were other non-terrestrials that as humans, we were beginning to interface with, and this included some of these Nordic-looking groups. And they were also making contact with the Nazis, but they were making contact with a little bit more positively oriented Germans as well, such as, like the Maria Orsic and her group.
Right. Now, we're going to head towards a break here in 60 seconds. So I want to ask this question, because when we come back, we're going to deal with Paperclip and then jump into current events. Did the Draco control the Germans, or was it the other way around? Did the Germans control the Draco?
Basically, it was an alliance. They were working together. The goal was to eventually produce a whole lot of, spaceships that they could use to go out and conquer other star systems along the Draco with. So this was it looked like a partnership on the surface, but the Draco most likely had something in the vice.
Right. So it wasn't exactly a mutually beneficial relationship, in other words.
Right.
Yeah, interesting. Okay, let's take a break right here. When we come back, we're going to get to Paperclip. We've got to go to Paperclip because that is the next stage in the development of the SSP. This is Fade to Black. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Our guest tonight, Corey Goode. We're going to do a full history of the SSP, the Interstellar War, and what is going on today, along with all of your questions. It's Fade to Black on the Game Changer Network and KGRA, The Planet. More with Corey Goode right after this short break. Stay with us.
This is Fade to Black with Jimmy Church on the Game Changer Radio Network and KGRA, the Global Radio Alliance.
The station that talks the net. KGRA Radio.
Hello, I'm Kat Deely, and you're listening to my main man, Jimmy Church, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Hi, this is Ray Hobbs here, repping the planet, and you're listening to my good friend, Jimmy Church, Fade to Black, on the Game Changer Network and the KGRA digital broadcast station. I'm getting older and noticing that my body just doesn't work as well as it used to. So I like to keep fit as possible by hitting the gym a few times a week. Recently, I started having a nagging bicep pain, and it got so bad I couldn't even lift the weights. When I was complaining about it to a friend, he told me about Angioprim. He said chelation helps remove toxins, heavy metals, and cholesterol in veins and arteries that may cause blockages. You know, after just 1 week of taking Angioprim, the pain was gone, and now I'm back in the gym full strength. Scientific research proves the active ingredient in Angioprim has superior oral chelation action that helps promote cardiovascular health. So to learn more, go to angioprim.com. That's ANGIOPRIM.com, or talk to a trained consultant. Call Angioprim toll free at 877-882-7221. You'll feel better with more energy. Call 877-882-7221 or go to the website angioprim.com.
This is Toby Kebbell. You're listening to jimmychurchradio.com. Don't hurt me, Jimmy. I'm only little.
Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And this is Ari Gold.
We're of the Honey Brothers. Well,
Yes.
We are of the Honey Brothers. Hey, I'm Adrian Grenier.
And I'm Ari Gold.
We're the Honey Brothers.
And you're listening to Jimmy Church.
The Revolution.
What's up, Fadernauts? Studio Dome loves Fade to Black and the F2B audience so much that they have put together the ultimate stereo Bluetooth system. They've done it just for you. Man, check this out. The Studio Dome SBB2 stereo system is here. It's featuring 2 Studio Boombox 2 SBB2 wireless Bluetooth speakers, packed in its own custom hardshell case. This Studio Dome system features the very latest in stereo Bluetooth technology. The 2 full-range boomboxes are in true wireless stereo. You've got to hear this. It's amazing. It's just $129, and use the promo code JCRTWS, and you'll also get free shipping. It's simple. Just go to jimmychurchradio.com, click on the Studio Dome banner. Go Beckley Tepe.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to Jimmy Church on Fade to Black, across the globe on the Game Changer Radio Network and the one and only KGRA Radio, The Planet.
All right, welcome back, Fade to Black. Our guest tonight, Corey Goode. Tomorrow night, Mike Sauvé is going to be here. And his new book, Who Authored the John Teeter Legend? All John Teeter, all night, tomorrow night, here on Fade to Black. And then Thursday night, John Rappaport's going to be here with us, No More Fake Newsroom Live. All right, back to Corey. Corey, before the break, as we started to get into the German scientists and the Draco and what was going on with the technology, we need to get into Paperclip. Now, everybody knows about Paperclip and that program, bringing over the German scientists for our rocket program and research over here. But at that time, did the German scientists that were here with Paperclip, did they introduce us to the Draco and their technology, or did the United States already have some type of knowledge about what was the Draco and what they were here doing?
Yeah, the United States already had a good idea about 3 or 4 different species on the planet when it came around the time of Paperclip. What the United States really didn't understand was how dedicated these Paperclip scientists still were, or many of them still were, to the Nazi Party, which had now relocated down to Argentina and Antarctica.
Right.
So these people were in contact through spies that were in place already from World War II, in contact through their spy network with their superiors in Antarctica and Argentina. And so they were getting orders, and they were passing information back and forth. They were interfering in technological developments of the United States when needed. They would cause experiments not to work outright or technology to fail. So they were working against us in the beginning. But all of that changed in the early 50s, around 1952, when after, I guess, high jump, and we had gone down there and realized that we could not handle them technologically or militarily any longer. We then had the Nazis fly over Washington, D.C. to basically use that as brinksmanship to force the Americans to come to the table and negotiate with them.
Did the Draco share weapon technology? Obviously, they shared the anti-gravity and flying saucer, spaceship technology and off-world technology. But what about weapons?
Yes, they shared weapons technology with the Germans. But you have to understand that handing this information over to the Germans, it always has to go through this research and development phase to where they have to take the technology that's beyond their understanding, find a way to marry their technology to that technology, and then produce a result consistently that they would like, and then bring it to a point where they can manufacture it and put it in the field.
So World War II ended, and they didn't have a chance to develop the technology that they were exposed to.
Right.
It would have been a different story. With your guess, with your research and what you have been able to find out, how close were they to really causing a lot of trouble?
They were very close. They were already able, with the help of some of the non-terrestrial groups down in Antarctica, to repel a battle group that was coming down to basically invade Antarctica. So they were very close.
Yeah. And what other countries know about the Draco or have contact with them? At this time, was it just the United States and Germany, or were there other countries too?
There people had known about the Draco under different names for a long time through their occult practices. A lot of these Germans were doing these ancient German occult practices that were causing these beings to manifest. And these beings happened to be, reptilians.
Now,
so they were accessing them through basically magic and ritual for some time before they made the technological leap that these were technologically based and not just spiritually based.
And throughout this period, I have three questions, and then we're going to move on. Did the United States know about the bases on the moon and Mars? Second, were the Nordics involved, or was it just the Draco at this time? And third, were the Nordics involved in the negotiations of the alliances that were going down with the Draco and the rest of the world?
Okay, let's take those one at a time.
Yeah, right.
So we'll just do the first one. What was that?
The first one was, were the Nordics aware and around about the relationship between the Draco and the rest of the world?
Yes, the Nordics tried to warn the United States about making deals with this Draco group, but of course the humans didn't listen. They were wanting the Nordics to provide us with a lot of offensive weaponry that they weren't willing to provide us with because we weren't spiritually in equilibrium with our technological state already.
Right.
So, they knew what was going on. They were interacting with us at the same time. And a lot of people, when they think about the Draco or these different groups, they try to put it into these little time chunks that this group was in contact with us, and then this group later got in contact with us. The fact is that we had multiple groups in contact with us at the same time.
And did we have, along with all of this conversation that was going on and the knowledge that was being shared, did the United States know about the moon base and what was going on Mars?
Well, they had intelligence about the, I guess, fledgling base system that had developed, but they were not getting until like the late 50s when we really started. The United States started working with the breakaway Nazi group from South America.
Right.
We really didn't have all of that intelligence yet.
So, which says to me, and I need your confirmation on this, that the paperclip group was holding back, and we thought that we had something good going on there, but they certainly knew about what was going on the moon and Mars, but didn't tell us about it.
Right. They were part of a plan all along. The Nazis had this technology that they would like to develop, and they wanted to co-opt the United States and the industrial might that had beat them. We were producing 5-10 tanks for every one they were.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to use our infrastructure to build out a wider infrastructure in outer space. And to do so, they had to infiltrate us. And when we were making deals with these Nazi breakaway groups, we had planned all along to infiltrate them and take them over, but they were already several steps ahead of us in that process.
Was there a reason why von Braun didn't, allegedly, I should say, put us on the moon until 1969, when obviously there was already a moon base there? Was there a deliberate attempt to sabotage the public version of the space program?
Well, yeah, and all of this was compartmentalized. Who knows what von Braun knew about, the space program that we were developing. We were already going to the moon, before the time of Apollo.
Right.
So, all of this is so compartmentalized. As I've stated, some of these military industrial complex space programs that are made up of like the NSA, DIA, Air Force Intelligence, that have a couple of space stations about 400 or 500 miles in orbit of the Earth, and they have a number of these exotic craft, like these triangular craft, that service them. So, and a lot of these people, they've been given briefings, and they don't know anything about any bases on the moon or Mars, and they've been told that they're the top of the totem pole security-wise, and they just will not accept anything you have to say that does not fit into their, programmed reality.
Were the Draco freely leaving Earth at that time, too, as well? Were they coming and going?
At what time? In
the 50s?
Yes, yeah, they were coming and going from Earth and our solar system freely.
Gotcha. Okay, now let's jump forward a little bit in the timeline, and let's go to the brain drain. What was the brain drain?
Well, once the Nazis had infiltrated the West sufficiently to where they were able to start actually building out this infrastructure, they needed the people to do it. And they wanted the best minds, the best engineers, the best that they could get to do this. So they had approached these people, told them that an asteroid or something was on its way to hit the Earth, that they were the best of the best, they were special, and they were chosen as a continuity of species project to take humans to Mars, let's say, and set up colonies there and industrial sites there to make it more likely that our species would survive.
And when the brain drain was active, did the participants that volunteered, once they were told, did they have a chance to back out, or was that it? You were kidnapped virtually, right? And almost enslaved is the word I want to use.
Yeah, once you were in, you were in. And they did deceive a lot of these people. They showed them brochures that were actually images of some of our deep military bases that are for the elite to keep them safe here on Earth. And they were told that this is on Mars, and they see these great big glass elevators going up, real futuristic looking. And they're told, this is like the Jetsons. You're going to live like the Jetsons. And, they take their family with them. They arrive on Mars, and they get a very quick reality check, and they find out that indeed they and their families are now slaves.
How many were involved? And a large chunk also came from South America too, right?
Yeah, South America, the United States, Europe. They pulled them out of Asia. They pulled them everywhere.
And what's your best knowledge of how many families, how many people were involved?
The number of people has gone into the millions over decades. This is something that was ongoing. There was a real big drive in the beginning, to get, we need 50,000 people immediately. And then after that, they just needed to sustain the numbers along, with bringing fresh people in. But they also were sustaining the numbers because the people were procreating on these bases.
Right. And it indeed was a one-way ticket.
Yes.
You didn't come back.
No.
Okay. Now, and with that, as sensational as that sounds, we could probably go back and look at numbers and find a lot of missing people, right? And there's that part of it. But the other part is, how can you keep something like this so secret? And how come we don't know about it, or how come we can't account for it? How do you keep a project like this that is so large with 50 million people, missing and enslaved? How do they keep this secret?
Well, if the people don't come back, they can't tell their secrets. But they would, and I think David Wilcock has kind of talked about this in the past. They would have people fill out a bunch of postcards, tell their family they're taking a job at an exotic location. And, the postcards get fewer and fewer until they don't hear from them anymore. And people move on with their lives.
And that's it. Forgotten.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to 1980. Solar Warden was formed. Take us there. What happened in 1980?
Yeah, Solar Warden was formed. They were building the first vessels, which were very large, glorified submarines, basically, that had electromagnetic torsion drives, had their power plants in the beginning were just your run-of-the-mill nuclear power plants. Then later on, they moved to these thorium-type reactors. And then much later, closer to the late 90s, around that time, they moved to this zero-point energy module that they had that took up very little space in the module that was that once kept or held these very large reactors.
These ships were obviously huge. Where did they build them?
I was told that they built them in Utah, and they were modular. They were built in pieces. The outer hull was built in, the one I was in was in 2 pieces. And then the inside, they could build modules that would slide in and out of the inside hull. If that makes sense.
Yeah, and you have described them like submarines, and you asked me to go look at a video, which I did, and you said if you can understand this, then you can understand basically what the ships were like, except for they were, much larger. And yeah. you made another comment that I found really, really interesting. You said that the guys that built these ships, well, I think they built one. They built one originally?
Yeah, well, they built a group. They built carriers. They had these smaller craft that were to service these ships out in space.
Right.
But this, in particular, yes, these are these larger cigar-shaped vessels that I was just describing.
And the crews that built the ships lived on the ships as they built them.
Different, like the engineering group mainly lived on board the craft as they were finishing building it. so they could learn the systems in and out.
And how did they leave the Earth? Because we're going to get to the LOC now. I mean, that's the next stage in this timeline. How did they leave Earth without being seen?
Sometimes they are seen.
Right.
Yes, but they take off at a given time when they're supposedly going to be less likely to be seen. They lift off from the surface of the Earth, go into outer orbit, get in contact with the Lunar Operation Command, which is basically, flight control for the area around here, and then they're told where they are assigned.
Right. And did the Russians or the Chinese or even the Australians, who had pretty extensive radar, and the British, were they able to track? Did they know that these crafts were going between the moon and Earth at that time?
They became aware as their space programs started to develop. The Russians started to develop these spherical type craft that were fairly maneuverable and reliable. They eventually started working closer with the United States, even during the time of the Cold War. So a lot of the Cold War stuff was, theater.
Yeah, we're going to get to Ronald Reagan here in just a bit. But what I want to address is the original German base was turned into the LOC. Why? Why not build something new?
Well, to get real estate up on the moon, to have any real estate that you're able to build on is a very positive thing. The moon is kind of split up between different non-terrestrials into these, zones, kind of like they've separated Antarctica into different zones that the United States controls, that Russia controls, and the moon is kind of that way too. And it's the groups are very segmented from each other, and they do not allow trespassers.
So the original German base was in a
sorry,
that's okay. The original German base was in a zone that we had access to, is what you're saying.
Yeah, sorry, I had water down the wrong pipe there. Yeah, the Germans were given an area that they could build on by the Draco, on the Draco's claim.
Well, man, I want to jump ahead, but I'm not going to. Let's stay right here. In 1986, there was the 20 and Back program that involved you.
Right.
And so the LOC was already in place, right? And which was around 1980, 81, 82. That got developed. 86 was the 20 and Back program. What was that?
Yeah, the 20 and Back program was a program that they normally, it was an offer that was normally made to military personnel, but they needed, civilian specialists as well. And it's a program to where you would sign off on going out into space for 20 years, and at the end of that 20 years, be brought back to Earth after first being blank slated or having your mind messed with to where you have no memories of it.
Right.
And then and this is where you lose people. They age regress you through some pharmaceutical type of method, and then they stitch you back in the time frame that they took you out to begin with.
Yeah, and why not? This is the question you probably get most often, so I'll just address it right now. Why not just leave you at the same age? What was the necessity for the regression?
There was some sort of deal in place that if they were to pull assets in this manner, that these assets had to be when they were done using them, these assets, being people like myself, had to be returned to the point in time and mentally and age-wise that they were when they were taken. Why this was done, I don't know, but I think it has to do with a technology exchange between the Nordic groups and some of these syndicate groups that ended up forming these secret space programs.
And how many people were involved at that time that you knew of in the 20 and back program, and were they all regressed?
Well, yes, everyone was regressed, even the military people. They had people that were obviously, military in the space program, and they had been pulled out to do this 20-year 20 and back program while they were serving in the regular military. So they were kind of recruited out of the regular military. When they're done, they're going to be returned back to the same time period that they were taken as well, and also have their memories wiped.
Now, was it at this point that you were exposed to the Germans and the Dark Fleet?
Yeah, that was throughout the time in the space program. You would see these people. There'd be people in different uniforms, different energies about them, and you would just assume they're all a part of your program, and you just don't know anything about them. But as time progressed, you would hear people talking about, oh, that group, they didn't like their attitude, and so you started hearing and gaining information about the other groups over time like that.
And so, what was the Dark Fleet?
Yeah, it was a group of very, they look like Nazi type people that for a long period, we had no idea what they were doing in Solar Warden. But they obviously had craft that were more offensive than the ones that we were flying, and they were very secretive and had an air about them like they were more important or knew something we didn't. And eventually we found out that they are out flying alongside the Draco in controlling territories and conquest as well.
Wow. Why? What was it used for? When you say it like that, it sounds almost offensive. Was it offensive and defensive?
The Dark Fleet?
Yes.
That was purely an offensive force. They were armed to the teeth, and they were flying outside of our solar system almost exclusively alongside Draco.
And so they continued to develop that technology that they were exposed to and those weapons in World War II, and now we're in the mid-'80s, and they are armed to the teeth, and they have a completely offensive fleet for war.
Yeah, and at a certain point, when we developed a certain understanding of these anti-gravity and scalar technologies, our engineers started building the stuff like crazy in our military-industrial complex, and we started building it very well. And we caught up very quickly in being able to fabricate a lot of what was given to us.
And so we had the LOC. The LOC was us, right? And that was ours. But
yes.
The Germans and the Draco had a joint base up there that was off limits. What do you know about that?
Very little. What I found out is that they're doing a lot of genetic type of testing. There's a large part of it are laboratories, and they also have part of the area that deals in this human slave trade that is going on.
Okay, I don't want to jump into the slave trade just yet, because there is also the ICC that comes into play here, the Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate that is there. And they're involved in trade. And part of that is this interstellar slave trade. But first, what is the ICC, and is it just a money machine?
Basically, it's a conglomeration. The Interplanetary Corporate Conglomerate is basically who heads it. It's a super board, like a board.
Hi, everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot, and I am doing my second show in a few hours because of the strange difference in time zones between the U.S. and the UK, where I presently am. I'm about to do a tour of the ancient sites with Maria Wheatley, as many people will know if you have been following my website. So if you're interested in buying tickets to that event, we are selling day tickets at this time. So that can be a lot of fun to go around to the ancient sites. And Maria is extremely knowledgeable, and we will be doing some meditations and whatnot to help balance those ley lines, etc. So it will be a fascinating time, I'm sure. So at this time, I want to say that I'm here with Shane. He goes by the Ruiner. I don't know if he's even using that moniker anymore, but it seems to be how he became known. So we in the media are using it simply so that people searching on YouTube can figure out which Shane it is without, I guess, the benefit of a last name. So for those purposes, I'm going to put him on the screen here. Shane, you want to say hello to everyone?
Hello, everyone, and hi, Carrie. Good to talk to you again. And once again, wish it was under better circumstances.
I hear you. Well, I've actually been thinking about that quite a bit, and just want to say, certainly welcome your feedback on this, but, that I think there's nothing wrong with this kind of human dialogue going on, even in public. And this is the kind of thing that, as we get more immersed into sort of a group culture that involves all of the planet, and maybe eventually, other ETs coming on board, those that are so-called purebred ETs, because we're all, basically a hybrid race of ET DNA. In other words, we're talking to each other. And I think that that's going on, whether it's on the internet or off the internet, or subliminally, we're in contact with each other through dreams, through astral travel, through just all of our interactions, as we're part of this multiverse. And if you want to look at it this way, we're in it all together. So we might as well talk to each other, and we can do it publicly too. It should be allowed. So I'm not despairing over that notion. I don't like targeting, however, and I have tried to stay away from this topic for so long, all the time it's been going on, really, foreseeing some major problems with regard to the specifically Corey Goode, set of information. And some of it is perfectly good and actually has been on Camelot and our whistleblower testimony for over 11 years and many years prior to when Corey hit the scene. So none of it has been a surprise to me. Now, I do want to say that there may be some details Corey has come up with that are useful and valid information. This is very possible, and we can get into that in more detail as this moves on. I think it's interesting to say, though, that the discussions about this situation have not centered on the information per se. So I think that's something of a problem. And I'm in a position to discuss the information simply because we specialize in whistleblower testimony and specifically in the secret space program, and always have since the beginning of Project Camelot. But in this case, and let me say, this is a conversation for those that think I am going to talk too much and you're not going to talk enough, which I get sometimes, with which basically I could care less about. But for the people that do have that gripe, I do want to say this is not an interview. This is a conversation. So, Shane, at this point, any comments on what I just said?
Well, I definitely agree. Everyone needs to be talking to each other, especially in situations like this where there seems to be opposing sides. I think the opposing side should have a discussion. I think that's the only way that we'll ever move forward beyond any of this type of nonsense, not just in the microcosm of the alternative media, but, globally. I think that conversation, trying to take in each other's point of view and make sense of it all together, is where we should be striving to move forward to. And this is just the start of it. Obviously, there can be nitpicking on any one aspect of any of it, but I think on the whole that this is giving us all a very good opportunity to start doing that, to start, chatting between each other, sharing what we've come to know on all different topics. And when it comes to situations like this, I mean, the internet has made the world a much smaller place. So the he said, she said games that we were all familiar with in high school kind of tend to blow up in our faces because everything's recorded. Most things are in texts. There's no real room for that type of dynamic in this community anymore. So I think that putting that all together, I agree with you in regards to, say, the testimony of Corey and there being a lot of things in there that are valid and are useful. And I think what it all boils down to is exactly what you said, that a lot of that stuff has been on Camelot for the last 11, 12 years, right? So it's not a lot of new. I think a lot of people are calling into question the way that it's being packaged and put forward more than the information itself, which I think is why the dialogue is what it is about it.
Fair enough. Now, I do want to say that actually there's kind of two parts of the Corey Goode information, which one has to do with what it seems to be his interactions with off-planet beings. And then there was the original information, even more original. And I do want to, I know people have been writing to me in droves, actually, asking me to explain, my role in all of this. And I just listened to the Randy Moggum, I'm not sure how to say his last name.
Randy Moggins, Off Planet Radio.
His interview with Christine, and she got several things wrong. And so it's very important that I set the record straight since it has to do with me, right? So I will take this opportunity to do that. And originally, just so people know, Bill, this kind of, I guess to put a history in place, the most recent rendition of this kind of dialogue about what is centered around Corey Goode, but actually should extend to the whole sector and even beyond that, because I don't see such a difference in the mainstream media either when there are major disagreements that go back and forth there. And that's always an interesting dynamic over there. We consider the alternative media to be its own sort of entity, but it's just as guilty of a lot of these sort of transgressions, if you will, lies, innuendo. I'm calling this the Rashomon dynamic for a reason, because we have a lot of people, some of whom are talking about things they know nothing about, some of whom are trying to find out the truth, and some of whom are testifying as to what they know, but they only know their portion. And therefore, sometimes when they speak for others, they are coming at it sort of wrong-ended, and that's dangerous. Being in Camelot, of course, I have some very, I guess you might say, direct exposure to many of the players. So my information is often not secondhand; it's actually firsthand, and that's in a lot of cases to do with a lot of subjects. Just by, kind of, I don't know, because we became, I guess you might say, a centralization point where, with my over 600 video interviews and several years of radio shows, obviously I've sort of done the gamut, and that there are still people that I haven't interviewed, which is always fascinating, and I'm happy to do more. But with that said, I just want to set the stage for people understanding where I come into this and where I actually have nothing to do with it. And then we'll go into sort of your role and where we're going. So just to set the record straight, I was approached by Corey Goode. I did not approach him. I actually hadn't been aware of him at all. And I can't even remember how we got in touch. But at some point, I think I received an email from him. And then I connected him to my Skype. He told me he was someone posting on Avalon. As I found out, he had been posting there since, I believe, the year is 2010, if I have my chronology right. So he was on the forum, and he had sort of become part of that group. You call, the forum is large, but it's not that large. And actually, it's what I consider to be quite a clique. In other words, there is within the forum, this doesn't mean everybody, but there's a very select group that are associated with the other founder. Bill Ryan and I started Project Avalon all those years ago, but actually when we split up, I gave him Project Avalon and I took Camelot, is how it worked out. And there was a reason for all of that. And I'm not going to go into that whole history, but maybe someday I can. And I'm writing a book right now, so maybe it'll all make sense. But I want to say that, so what happened was there was a clique on Project Avalon, and certain members got to know the other members, both on the forum, and then they started to socialize off the forum. And some of them saw each other, would go off and discuss things on Skype. And I have no idea whether, when they met each other in person and when they didn't. And Simon Parks was originally part of that group. And there are others, and there are some that are still there. And I don't even know if you were there, but lots of people have come and gone from that interaction and the forum. And I have always been a member because I was a founding member and because of my relationship with Bill Ryan. And I have really not been involved, and I actually never go there. Except once in a while, somebody will write to me and tell me either I'm talked about or there's something they really want to know about. And then I will go on to the forum and try to answer their question and, in a very circumspect way. And when I do that, normally I post it on my own website so that my own audience will be party to whatever I have said on Avalon. So that's kind of what goes on. So enter Corey Goode. He contacted me, and what he said initially to me was, that he was being interviewed by what was in essence Bill Ryan and Christine, who I think were married at the time, but basically Christine had done the interview and that Bill was editing it or whatever. And that there was some problem because there were some things Bill didn't want to include that had to do with Nazis. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I only know what I was told by him back in those days. And so when he came to me and he said that, and then he said, and I'm going to be interviewed by David Wilcock. So, and he also then sent me some posts on the Skype. And I think he also emailed me some posts. And so I gathered, he sent, the Avalon posts and copied them to me. And since I hadn't read them, I read them. And I'm always cordial to people that I'm in potential talks to decide if I want to interview them. But because, as I do with people that come to me, I tend to be a bit suspicious, and I am very, you might say, standoffish even. And that's purposeful after 11 years of being in this world. And when Corey contacted me, I think it was in November of 2014, but, I'm not great on dates, but I think that's when it was. And anyway, I'd have to go over my records. And I think actually I blocked him from my Skype eventually. So I lost all the records, but they're out there, and he's made copies. He sent them to YouTube and so on and so forth. So what happened was he asked me if I would interview him because of what was going on with Bill Ryan and the slowness with which the interview was going out. And then again, sort of prompting me, trying to say that David Wilcock was going to interview him, and so wasn't I interested. And actually, he used in his post on Avalon the name Dr. Richard Boylan as a reference, and he also did with me. And unbeknownst to him, I actually don't have a good opinion of Dr. Richard Boylan and his work. I am highly suspicious of it. And that doesn't mean that there's not some good stuff there. And it's been many years since I had any exposure to his work. I haven't followed his career. So maybe, he's a great guy now. I don't know. All I know is, that's a red flag for me. When somebody brings him up as their reference, then immediately I'm skeptical because I know there's a problem. And that's all I'm going to say about that. I'm not going to, go into, because I'm not interested in bashing people. I just want people to understand my state of mind with regard to Corey and why I had that particular state of mind. So, but I am a fair person, and even though he used a reference of somebody that is a red flag for me, and he also said he was going to be interviewed by David, and this is another thing. If you come to me and say David Wilcock is interviewing you, and you want me to do the same, actually, I don't want to do it. And that's right out the gate, and I've always been like that. Why is that? Because I am actually not interested so much in interviewing people that have already been interviewed by other people, number one. Number two, David Wilcock and I are very prominent members of this sort of group, this alternative sector that heads up what you might say is an investigation into the secret space program. And he's a friend. So I didn't feel that that was a good calling card, because if David was going to interview him, then David, I make way, let David do it. So unbeknownst to him, that was not also a good thing to say to me. So that was all fine and good. And we kind of left it hanging. And at that point, I actually drove up to interview Mark Richards. Strange kind of sequence of events. And so Captain Mark Richards of the Secret Space Program is somebody I have now done 6 interviews with. And I drive up to Vacaville prison. It's not actually called that. It's in Vacaville, but it's got some special name that I don't get right. So I'm just going to refer to that. But at any rate, I go there with his wife, Joanne Richards, and I sit and take notes with a pencil when I'm allowed to have a pencil. And I basically do what I call total recall, bring back my information, and then I put it, my notes I publish, as well as my, right after the interview, when I leave the prison, I turn on an audio and sometimes a camera and basically put everything down. And then usually I compile it into a more professional presentation. And all 6 of those interviews are available on Project Camelot and highly recommended. He has been a great resource for information about the secret space program. And he was talking, and I was talking with him about artificial intelligence. So this time when I went to visit him, having had this sort of initial contact with Corey Goode, I printed out a lot of Corey's stuff that he sent me that came off of the forum, I guess. And after having read it, I actually made a copy and sent it to Mark. This is something very unusual for me because I don't use snail mail, generally speaking. I don't like it. And I just don't enjoy going through that whole process of, going to, I know it sounds silly, but still I don't. So I did do it because I thought, well, here's a guy who wants me to interview him. He's talking about artificial intelligence. I know Mark knows a great deal about this. Why don't I show this to Mark? That way it would be sort of a preliminary vetting of who Corey Goode was from the point of view of somebody I do respect. So I gave him the information. So when I interviewed him, we very briefly said, I said, did you see this Corey Goode stuff I sent you? What did you think? And he said, well, most of it's pretty accurate according to what I know. However, there is some disinfo in there. That's it. That's all he said. So when I came back, I made my interview and I then published it on my website. And then I get a mail from, it was a saga, and I don't even know if I remember all the details. But what happened was, the gist of it was that Corey Goode had Christine and the Avalon members that are this clique of moderators, I guess it is, or whoever they are, write me a group letter. Only it was sent from Christine's email, so she was the main spokesperson as far as I could tell. And it basically said, oh my God, you've, released his name and you must take it down off your interview. He was mentioned once in this video interview with Mark Richards, which is, like 2 hours long, the information. And it was also in writing once on my notes. So, because we had referenced him, and it was, neither positive nor negative. It just said that some of his information was correct. We didn't actually, I don't think we left in the disinfo part. So then what happened was Corey was apparently prevailing upon Christine or somebody to get me to take this down. Now, the trouble is that during the interaction with me and Corey, before I left to visit Mark, I found out, and I did have a little investigation, and then subsequently when he asked me to take it down, I did more, and I had somebody else do some investigation. And I found out that he had been on Avalon since 2010, that he's moniker on Avalon ended with his last name, Goode, Goode, spelled the same way. That he called himself something like, and I don't remember exactly, but E.T. Goode, and, E.T.Goode or something of that nature. And then also I was told by various people that he was very well known on Avalon and that he was actually known under his name, Corey Goode. And because I also was told initially that Bill Ryan and Christine had interviewed him and that David was about to, you see, my mentality around him was that he was obviously known in the sector. And I also found evidence that he had his own website under his name, I believe, and someone else investigated in a very short period of time and found out exactly who he was, etc. Plus, he signed his emails in a very unusual way for anyone who's trying to stay secret, with his home phone number, cell phone number, all these titles and links and whatnot. I mean, it's quite quite long. That made me suspicious initially. And in the dialogue with Corey, sure enough, he said, well, I'm really reluctant to come out under my name. And I said, why? You're out. They know who you are on Avalon. Avalon is a public forum. It's too late. And I guess he just didn't, listen to me or couldn't care less or whatever. But he decided in his own mind that he was unknown, even though he'd been on Avalon since 2010. So that's how this whole saga went out there. But I want people to know that, number one, actually, I probably never would have interviewed him because of the red flags coming up. Two, I didn't come to him. He came to me. And three, because David Wilcock was going to interview him, and Bill, as a matter of fact, via Christine, his wife, I wouldn't want to touch him as a whistleblower, basically, because I'm not interested in glomming on to whoever else people are getting. It's just not the way I work. So it's just very, very important that I make that clear to people. And, I don't think there was a bidding war, as some people are saying, very misguidedly, for the Corey Goode information. Actually, it was so tame back then that it actually had nothing new in it, as far as I could tell. It was all about, artificial intelligence that everyone had out there, nothing specifically great or wonderful. There was this thing about, some, I forget what he's called, a colonel or whatever, who was the one who supposedly picked him up and brought him, to Mars or wherever. And all of that actually, even then, struck me as questionable. But let me say that I deal with questionable testimony all the time. So the fact that it was questionable does not make me turn off to it. I have since been less than interested because actually the Blue Avian stuff is highly suspect to me. And I have a reason for thinking that. I know that David is very interested in the raw material. And I know that what is in the raw material, if you study it and if you understand the background on the Ra group and who Ra supposedly is, and also to do with, Horus and all the Egyptian gods, and specifically with the ibis, which has to do with Thoth, then you begin to see where Blue Avian stuff sort of hooks into the raw material, information, and Egypt, and where somebody like David, who wants to see all this come true and be true, would be vulnerable to taking this on board. And, I love David and respect him. I do not think he always has the right end of the stick, so to speak, if you want to call it that. He and I will disagree on various things. That's normal. It's not a problem for me. I still consider him a friend. I do not think David is a liar. I don't think he's out there, to solely make money. He certainly wants to survive. He has a very healthy ego. So do I. I think it's important to have a healthy ego. It actually helps you against takeover. So it's an important earthly attribute. But yes, it can get out of hand. And the Gaiam TV, now, let me say, I have had interactions. I've sat in the same room and talked for quite a long time with the head of Gaiam. And I know some of his motivations. He shared them with me. I also have suspicions about some of his other motivations he hasn't shared. And I will say that a lot of the sort of dog and pony show that it ended up to be, the Corey Goode story, has a lot to do with the head of Gaiam, whose name is Yurka, and I may be pronouncing that wrong.
Yurka Raisavi.
Yes. And so I do want to say a caveat here. I have also been wined and dined by him and asked, investigated as a possible host for shows on there. They flew me to Colorado. I was also recently on the Sean Stone. Sean Stone has gone on to Gaiam and done his show there. And I know things about the background of Gaiam I'm not going to talk about. I know things about, employee relations, whatever you want to call that. I know, this is all stuff, where I'm actually on the scene and I can't, it's just the coincidence of the way I work. My work that pulls me into these places. But I do want to say that, the head of Gaiam became very enthralled by Corey Goode's story. And that is the main reason, in my view, based on everything I've heard and know, and I know quite a bit because David is my friend, that I'm not going to reveal. I'm not going to, I just can say that he was very interested in the Corey Goode, Yurka was. And that's why, as head of Gaiam, he made this possible. So I also want to say that Jay Widener was involved, but he is not the decision maker in regard to this show. Yurka is. And I think it's okay to say that Yurka was one of the sole producers, especially in the early days. I don't know what goes on now. So that's kind of how it got on Gaiam, and just wanted to set the record straight on all of that. I hope I haven't left anything out, but if people want to ask me questions, I'll answer them. Now, I don't want to dominate this conversation. I did want to set the stage, though, because, when people are talking about you and they say things that they just don't know anything about, or they've been lied to, and I have to say, possibly Christine was lied to, because I have evidence that Corey does not always tell the truth. That's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to go into detail. So be that as it may, I do also want to set this straight, the record straight for Shane today, because there have been a lot of accusations about him that came out on what was, in essence, I think, a written, if I understand it correctly, a written rebuttal from Corey to Bill Ryan when Bill Ryan made his statement. One last thing. When Bill Ryan made his statement, I kind of didn't want anything to do with any of this, because I hate this kind of thing if it appears to be targeting for a personality. I don't mind talking about the information and whether the information holds up and why and so on. But talking about the personality is a problem. I will say that lots of people are mind controlled. I don't think everyone is. I think some people have broken through. My estimation of Corey, after the time when I went through this thing where he also tried to get my YouTube channel taken off YouTube, he sent our dialogue to YouTube with his big signature, which again is not the behavior of a person who is trying to hide their identity. And it may be that I misunderstood him when he said he really didn't want to be out there, thinking that when you add 2 and 2 with David Wilcock and the interview with Christine and how many years he was on since 2010 on Avalon, maybe I misunderstood that he actually thinks he's hidden. Whistleblowers or people telling, truths about certain things, and, often get they think they're hidden when they're not. And this is like some kind of human, I don't know, vulnerability that they have. I'm not going to name names. I have other whistleblowers who do this. And I've had whistleblowers threaten us to take their information off our channel after it's been on there as long as 7 years, believe it or not, and gone viral all over the internet. I mean, these people can be completely out of their minds, but they also are brilliant in many cases, have great information. They have lies mixed with truth, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the sector that we're dealing with. And, let me say, the mainstream is just a suspect. Scientists have been lying to you forever. Archaeologists have been, digging up incredible finds and not telling you, putting it in hiding in the Smithsonian, for example. So if you want to point the finger at a sector that is full of disinfo, don't bother to point to the alternative. Yes, they're guilty in some cases, but more truth is coming out of the alternative sector than anywhere else. And let me also say that Corey Goode, whether he knows it or not and was aware of it or not, number one, is heavily mind controlled. And I'm someone who has been dealing with people with heavy mind control for 11 years. and I'm very good at spotting it. Number two, he is, basically being used. So with his knowledge or without it, at least an effort. I think it'll fail, but, nonetheless. And, this kind of thing goes on all the time. He's not the first kind of agent or asset that was sent into the alternative sector to disinfo them, to discredit us. And so, rather than people sort of dying in a ditch and having a panic, I think that they need to understand this has been going on at least as long as I've been in this sector, which again is over 11 years. And for much longer than I've been here, because Phil Schneider and all the, the really original great people that were part of this sector experienced this as well. And they still do, even when they're, dead, their deaths are being lied about. So talk about disinfo. It's huge. And so I just, I know it's a rant, but nonetheless, I have a lot to say about this kind of subject. But it doesn't really have to do with anyone that particularly. It just happened that because of the dynamics that went on, because Corey ended up connected with David and David was connected with Guillaume, that there was a sort of smooth road, you could call it. Now, whether that was orchestrated from a higher level, from people who are running the secret space program, or at least a sector of it, or a sector that doesn't want to see it succeed, or some reptilians or whatever, I don't know. But I certainly know that the evidence of orchestration is there, okay, if you want to look for it. And so I think I've covered most of that. Now, Shane, I'm sorry to have you sit through that. I hope it maybe helped your own understanding to some degree in case there were some details you didn't already know. But can you basically now let's move over to yourself. You can reply to some of the things I said, but I also want you to give yourself an introduction, say how you got into this, if you want to call it a mess or a lovely, enlightening experience or whatever you want to call it. And just, sort of talk about from your point of view, what's going on and why is it that Corey has decided to sort of target you in certain ways?
I'll kind of start with how I became involved with it all and then go back to some of the other things you said about, what may be leading all of this. But I was a member of Avalon for a long time, had kind of had a little bit of communication with Bill Ryan here and there, knew a lot of different people on the forum kind of behind the scenes. I didn't post a lot, but I was a member there for a long time. And I saw Simon come up through there, and I had contacted Simon, and Simon and I spoke back when he first made his arrival to Avalon. And when Corey was first coming out on the forum, he was posting a lot of the information before even the first interview with him was ever done with Christine and Avalon. I had messaged him. There's a few things that he had said where he had, especially with some of the cults, the order of their name is particularly important. And there was a couple times where he had gotten that right, and I had taken note of it. So I had started kind of sending him private messages saying hello and letting him know some of my own background and having, some private conversation with him that way, kind of supporting him because at the time I was supportive of him. I early on felt pretty strongly about the things that he was saying. I thought it was either very good research or he was involved somehow. So I was curious and wanted to get to know him. In that time, he had introduced me to David Wilcock as well, and I spent a lot of time talking to David, who I like a lot. I think he's a good person. And from there forward, I guess how I became more directly involved in all of it was that that interview that he had done with Christine ended up being 2 parts, and the second part was a bunch of audio that, at least what I was told from Corey at the time, was that Bill didn't think it could be salvaged, and was just going to throw it out because the audio quality was too bad. And I knew I could fix it because he sent me a clip of it and showed me what the problem was, and I said I can fix most of that and make it sound good enough that you can put it out. So I did that for him. And through all of that, I kind of watched as Corey and David's relationship developed, because I've never actually had a voice conversation with Corey, but we would text chat on a daily basis, and I was talking to David almost daily for a few months. And so I kind of watched as the story developed, and that gave me a lot of my initial red flags. And then due to my own kind of experiences in life, I did some other checking and kind of realized that it was something I wanted to distance myself from. And so I kind of had. During that time, I had started writing my blog, the Ruiner blog, for a small group of people, not really intending it to ever become a part of this or that at all. And then, because the one that I wrote was about avians, I guess someone searching for blue avians had found it, and it talked about, the mind control programs behind the avian image and the nonsense that has gone into things like the Law of One and whatnot, that all are part of mind control for what people refer to as a secret space program. And so that was kind of picked up. I believe you reposted it. A couple other researchers had reposted it as kind of more evidence, if you will, for the red flags that people were already feeling, was that this sounded really familiar and reminiscent of other programs that we were already aware of. So from there, I guess when the blog first got discovered and was first posted, Corey and I were still talking, and he didn't know that I had written the blog, and he was actually like messaging me about the blog being posted, being like, see, here's another example of it being an attack on me, and kind of almost looking for me for sympathy in it, and blaming it on two other people that allegedly he believed had written the blog. And then when he found out, well, he even went so far as to say that he had checked with, his 3-letter organization contacts to verify that it was these two other people and not myself who wrote the blog. And then eventually it came out that it was me, and he was very quick to post my full name and the bands that I'm in and other information about myself, which was rather ironic considering his accusations or anger towards you and his name being used. He was the first person to take my name and start putting it all over the place, even though lots of people knew who I was and that I had written that and had not done so. So from there, he started using me as this kind of shadow figure, Illuminati disinformation agent who was sent out to discredit him and the Blue Avians, and how I was going to lead an orchestrated attack against him. And all of this nonsense was going on to his original blog, kind of blasting me and whatnot. And I guess because of all of that, people started asking me about it and reaching out to me to talk about it. And I had conversations with people about it, obviously, and I'm open and honest about my involvement and why I believe what I believe. And a lot of the time, like, if it's my opinion and people ask what I'm basing my opinion on, even if it's not something that I can verify for them, I will tell them. And in one case, it happened with you, it happened with Bill Ryan, in both my personal discussions with you both, when asked why I didn't believe his story and why I believe that him and his wife made it up, is that I was shown a video of him doing exactly that. Him and his wife sitting there drawing comparisons to the raw material and how David Wilcock would get on board with it because of that, and putting it into for that reason. Now, that's just where I'd form my own opinion from, and I would be lying if I didn't say that that was why, and it would be dishonest of me to say that, or unfair of me to say that you should not believe him because I saw that when I can't show it to you. So that's just my opinion. It's a kind of throwaway data point. But when it came back around this time, that was kind of another point that was used, was my having said that. And that's where Corey is this time around, this circus, bringing me back into it, saying that I've been discredited, that I've admitted to lying about it, blah, 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 all of which is not true. And that if I'm going to either put up or shut up with the video. And I agree with him on that. It is like, there is no video, so it is like a data point that shouldn't be being brought up again. It is a put up or shut up situation, and I don't have it to give to anyone, so there's no way that that's ever going to be shown. You can pretty much just throw it away at that. And so that's all I really tried to say to Corey. I responded right to the Stillness in the Storm blog saying, if you believe that I'm discredited because of the things that I've said, kind of go against what you believe, then here's a bunch of examples of you doing the same. And I never said that I had that video and was going to release it to the public. I said that I saw it, and my opinion is based on it because that is the truth. And that's pretty much where my involvement with it really ends. He likes to play this game where I've talked to you and everyone else behind the scenes and made you all believe that for whatever reason that you shouldn't trust him, which I've never done. And that's pretty much it. So all I can really do at this point is reiterate that Corey, I've got no reason to try and discredit you. I've got nothing really against you. I don't care other than you keep bringing my name into it. So yeah, I guess that's about that. And in terms of why it's being pushed and the agendas behind it, I don't know that actually comes from Corey or him being mind controlled or any of that, to be honest with you. I think that someone else has taken advantage of the fact that he's a willing pawn in all of that. And I think that it might be the person who's most excited about his story and pushing it the furthest who may be the person who should fall under the microscope for that. Again, that's just opinion. I don't know the man. I can't claim to have any kind of insider knowledge that is exactly what's happened. A lot of different people have done research on the people involved with Gaia TV and just where some of their affiliations may lie. And based on looking at all of that myself, I think that it doesn't have anything to do with Corey. I also think that we're going to maybe see evidence in that moving forward because by the looks of things, there may be a little bit of a separation between some of the players involved. And I think a lot of these questions will start to come to light. And that's why it's good that we're talking about it, because there are a lot of red flags and there are a lot of questions and there is some type of motivation here that we can all see. And I think that's why we all have our backs up about it, so to speak. It's just a matter of pinpointing what it is and trying to avoid that, I suppose. And I think discussing it will help us do that.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, there was one time, and you can tell me whether you want to talk about this. Actually, I didn't ask you, about it, so I'm just doing it here on the air. I hope you don't mind. Basically, you gave an example one time to me about something that you had run by Corey that you had, and it had something to do with something that didn't really happen to you, but you said it did. And then he basically jumped on it and said, yeah, I was there too. Do you remember that sort of scenario that you told me?
Oh yeah, that was a lot of, once he had kind of come forward with his Blue Avian story to David, because I didn't hear about it from Corey, I heard about it from David. And I immediately just, all my alarm bells went off and I called bullshit on it. And I was kind of playing with Corey, which has also come out the first time this all went around, that I was, playing along with Corey as if I was involved as well. And he was very receptive to that. There's obviously the kind of infamous chat that he posted between the two of us that at the time, he was using to support that I was a disinformation agent, and then later on went to try and spin that as if it meant that I was just a liar, which is kind of funny. He tried to use it in two different ways to support his own agenda. But he posted all of those conversations that we had where I was saying that I was involved with the Sphere Being Alliance as well, and they had done this, and he was, agreeing with me. And it's a very common tactic when you want to catch someone in a lie, is to just play along with them and get them to misspeak. And so that's what I was doing. And I was doing that for my own benefit. It wasn't for the public's benefit or whatever. I wanted to know for myself. And that's where that had come from. And because of all of that, there was some dialogue about money, and he assumed that I was on a payroll and said that he was on the payroll as well. And that's that screenshot that has been associated with all of this. Or if you go back and kind of watch the conversation, my side of it is pretty, it's very clear what went on my side of it, and that he jumped to a conclusion and thinking that I was on a payroll along with him. So, I think that's what you're alluding to, or what your question is about anyways, is I was playing games with Corey at the time, lying to him in order to get him to expose his own lie to me. And that wasn't something I was doing so that I could come out in the public or come on Project Camelot and tell everyone that I was doing that. That was just something I was doing because I wanted to know for myself, because I did not believe him.
Right. And I guess you don't mind then saying what the exact, situation was, because I think specifics can be useful in this scenario, and I do want to clarify that that post that Bill, that was then put, I guess, on the original, I guess it was Dark Journalist interview with Bill, was posted, the conversation between you and Corey, that had been sent to me by Bill as well years ago. And that was not doctored, from what I understand, in any way. That was just how it was, right?
Yeah, I mean, like Corey had shared it with many people before I ever shared it. So, and what people draw attention to is there's an edit symbol on that, but it's an edit that he did on his end at the time that he posted. It was just a typo that he corrected, like within a minute or two of having sent it to me. Nothing inconspicuous there. I don't know how to use Photoshop, so I wouldn't be able to Photoshop something like that. And I mean, there's lots of evidence because he put it out long before I ever did that shows that it's not edited in any way. If it was edited by anyone, it was edited by him because he put out the original. Other than that, I don't really know what to say. The specifics of what we were playing along with had to do with my interactions with the giants and stasis beings, and his claiming to know what was going on with that and whatnot. So I kind of used that as the specific thing to tell him that I was involved with the same people.
Well, as I recall, you said you had a meeting last night. You had a dream, vision, or whatever experience the night before, and that you were part of a meeting that was off planet, if I understand it correctly. That was,
and he was there too. Yeah,
and he was
there
there too.
There were several situations like that.
Yeah, and then he said, "Oh yeah, I know all about it. I was there."
Well, that's it, and that was part of the, when I say that it was a game, that's exactly how the game works. Is I say something like that, like, "Oh, I was at this meeting last night. This happened," and he's like, "Oh yeah, I know all of that because I was there too." Meanwhile, I know full well I wasn't at any meeting last night. None of that happened. So therefore, I know that if he's saying, "Oh yeah, I was there too," and then he's running to David and is becoming part of David's next vlog, then I know that it's a lie because I made it up, right? And that's how that went.
Yeah, and it's interesting how that kind of goes and so on. So what happens with that is that there seems to be, when people are mind controlled to a large extent, they, especially through trauma, they have alters. So you're not always dealing with the same person, and that person may actually not know what the other part of themselves is doing at any given time. And this can account for where a person who will actually, one part of Corey may be lying, the other part doesn't know he's lying and is actually trying to tell the truth. And so, and is a well-meaning guy. So, and in his experiences and whatever trauma went on, as a child, et cetera, we don't know. Now, this kind of thing is going on, though, with a lot of whistleblowers and a lot of, especially what we call super soldiers. Not all whistleblowers, obviously, are super soldiers. So there's a dynamic there that, is worth being aware of. And, this is also not to say that there isn't a person who is trying to convey something that they believe in. There's other people out there that I don't believe, some of whom I interview and some of whom I do not, who are telling stories that they fully and completely believe. They may not have been picked up by David Wilcock and Gaiam, but nonetheless, they're out there and they've been interviewed by me or other people. And sometimes people that I interview are containing some stories that are very good and very valid. And every once in a while, they'll be seeded with information that is wrong.
I'm not sure what's going on here, Blake.
Sorry. We were also told by Henry Deacon at one point, who's come out under his own name, Arthur Neumann. I was told that he'd given us some disinfo. And I have to say that I was aware that he had, always had suspected he had, but he actually told me that, coming out honestly about it. So my understanding of that is that not only if you work with like you have contact with various agencies and or you've worked with the military, et cetera, you may be allowed to say certain things and not others. That gets back to the William Tompkins situation in which he, during my interview, talked about reptilians feeding on children and even clarified a certain type of child, and said he didn't want to talk about it, but that it was very true and it was worse than what people think. That there's you can go to my interview and hear what he had to say on that. And he also said Bob Wood knew a lot about it also, but Bob Wood has since denied that. So what has happened here is that William Tompkins then subsequently broke off all contact with me because he got in trouble, I believe, for revealing that. Another part of the problem with William Tompkins is that he has been offered, and he even said this on an interview, he's a reverse aging pill, and he's very hopeful to get it, and that it, you get several renditions of it from what I understand. And I have reason to believe that it's real from other people and other angles. And I've reported on these on Camelot, and I have even a recent exposure to someone who might have been given that pill, whose name I'm not going to use right this minute. So what Tompkins is saying is that, in essence, if he doesn't play ball with this group, he is, in essence, not going to live much longer. He's very old. And he's also not going to get reverse aged. And he has a lot of loved ones he would like to see reverse aged. That's what you call spiritual materialism, when you're really obsessed with the body and staying alive in this body, in this sector, unlimited amount of time. Now, there are a lot of Illuminati who that is their aim in life. So that's worth knowing. But it's understandable with an elderly person that this could be a very desirable thing to have. That's also a motivating factor in what's going on here. Now, there is another aspect to this story, which has to do with the fact that was sent to me today, actually, by a certain person, that I guess has been released. And sorry, I forget by who. I'm sure it'll become obvious once I talk about it. But apparently there is a shot, I think it's taken at the Contact of the Desert, which I now find out is produced by none other but than Yurka of Gaiam TV fame. Behind the scenes. And I was always wondering why I wasn't invited to speak there. Now I know. Because Yurka actually has paid at Camelot compliments, tried to buy our material, and also told me he's glad I'm out there. But at the same time, I know he thinks I'm, a threat. So what happened was, apparently a photograph was taken of William Tompkins and Bob Wood around a table with a person who is now kind of having scrutiny put upon him, whose name I don't even remember, something like Richards ends up. And he is leading the charge on the Corey Goode, I don't know, comic book, movie, whatever, some type of group effort to bring this stuff further along the trajectory, so to speak, and recruitment, it seems, that involves some children, some kids as well, which sounds a little diabolical. But could be well-intentioned in all ways. You never know. But the thing is that this actually makes me think, again, that this points to an orchestration. So someone is pulling strings to connect these people together and actually make these things happen. And the way is being paved for that to happen. It is important to understand that, of course, the major media has already been made up of nothing but monopolies. These small fish were gathered up the way Yurka at Gaiam TV has been gathering up all the alternative sector, paying them lots of money to either get rid of them altogether and just take their material, or to keep them on board and give them a show. And David Wilcock's one of them. They made me the offer. I refused it. He obviously saw that I wasn't, because I have a background in Hollywood and producing. I wasn't going to let somebody just take over my stuff. And so on. So Yurka actually asked me recently, he said, I don't understand, I'm offering you money, and what's the problem? You're going to, it's non-exclusive license to your material. And I said, I'll tell you why, because I don't like the monopoly you're setting up. I don't believe in that. I believe in independent journalism. So it's important to know what's happening to the sector. There are other people besides Yurka that have tried to do the same thing. He's not the only one. John Rao of the UFO Congress is another person who's a millionaire or a billionaire or whatever he happens to be. I don't know. Nice guy, but let's say that he has been influenced by certain agencies of that, I'm sure. And, this is what's going on. It has been going on for a very long time. The conferences do not want you to know the real story. They are packaging this stuff now for public consumption. They know that the biggest researched items on the net are UFOs and sex. Okay, there's nothing bigger. And so the bottom line is they have to deal with this runaway train, which is awareness and waking up on the behalf of humanity. They're trying to do all these kinds of normal tricks that they always do, which is to gather things into a monopoly and then control them the way they control the mainstream news. And so it's understandable. I've just had an offer from somebody else who wants to control a certain portion of the sector. But I also think that person is not open-minded enough to allow anybody or the people out there who want to tell, the truth to speak. He will, pick and choose, and someone he doesn't agree with, he'll get rid of. This is a problem. So this is what's happening. And I appreciate your story and I appreciate your tactics, although nefarious. I do understand, within this scenario. And this kind of harks back to your own background in or with exposure to the Illuminati, does it not?
Absolutely. I mean, it is a nefarious act. It's not something, I proudly do. It's just something I had done because I was curious for myself. People that I was close to outside of the alternative community were also kind of questioning what was being brought forward in that way because,